Welcome again to the workshop of Wood Spun Round. This is Doug, and I am so glad to have you with me again as we make another project. This time it's a maple box. I was showing some pieces that I was putting into my shop. I don't know, a few days back, and the lady that owns the shop was saying that she would. There, well, let me back up and say I had two boxes in a group of things that I was putting in, and she said I'd like to have two more boxes. I want these two, and I want two more to give my four daughters for Christmas. And so this is one of the two extras that I'm turning for her. It happens to be maple. I wasn't sure what the piece was when I first picked it up and put it on the lathe, but this one is a maple block that I'm turning around. I'm going to hollow out, make a lid for it, all out of maple. I've already turned it round and separated the lid off. This is the body, the main body of the box, and I'm using my 1/2 inch bowl gouge here. This is the 1/2 inch bowl gouge is my go-to tool. You've seen this on almost every project I've done, simply because it's just I've used it so much that it's just my favorite tool. Whether it's the Sorby or this particular one is the Doug Thompson, really doesn't matter. I like them both. I was just shaping the outside there. Here I'm simply flattening the top side. I'm going to take a drill and drill out the largest part of the inside of this box. I don't do that very often. I usually simply turn it out. But these boxes need to be done with economy in mind. And so I'm going to just flatten it. I'm going to get a bit of a dimple in the very center. And then I'm going to use a Fastener bit that you'll see here in just a minute to take the inside of this out. And it saves me a lot of time. Saves a bit of wear and tear on my gouge. I would have to sharpen it a time or two during the hollowing process. But here you see I've got a 2 1/4 inch drill Fastener bit that I'm working it in, just taking my time. This is in grain, and so it's just hard. The wood is hard to begin with, but then drilling directly into in grain with this large Fastener bit is a bit tough. And so I'm about done here, about to pull it out, and there's not a lot left to do. I've got some hollowing to do still, because this drill bit makes a straight sided hole, and as you can see, my box body there is not straight on the outside, and I like the inside to mimic the outside as well. So I've done with the drill bit. I'm coming back with the parting tool just to make a ridge on the inside, a recessed ridge that my lid will sit onto. This is going to be an inset lid, so the top of the lid will be flush with the top of this box. So I just wanted to sink in this side just a little bit so the lid can go down into the box and sit on this ridge that I'm making right now. Got that done, and there's a lot of shavings, a lot of dust, what have you. But we're ready now to finish the hollowing process. I've pulled out my mini Easy Wood. It's the Easy Wood Tool Mini Hollower. I'll spit it all out here in a minute. But that Easy Wood Tool Mini Hollower does a great job with that round carbide cutter. And this is the small cutter on this mini tool. I'll use it to clean out the sides and even make the transition to the bottom, and do most all of the bottom work as well. And then a little later I'll bring out the larger Easy Wood, the Easy Finisher, which is the large round cutter, just primarily to take care of the ridges that this tool will make. This tool does a great job with that little small cutter of removing a lot of wood quickly, but it does leave ridges. I don't know that I guess if I go slow enough, I could do it without the ridges, but typically I don't. Typically I leave ridges and but that's easy to take care of with the larger cutter. Here I'm taking a moment just to blow out the shavings. They build up so quickly with this tool. If I'm remembering right, the first time I used this tool to hollow a small hollowed form out, I went right through the side. It just took out the wood so quickly. I wasn't expecting it to be to go that far that fast, but it really does. With a sharp cutter on there, you can remove some wood extremely quickly. This is the flat cutter as well. I don't have the negative cutters for this mini. In fact, I don't have any negatives that I know of. I don't turn that much resin, and that's where the negative rake cutters do such a great job, is in resin. Mine is almost 100% wood, and so the flat cutters do an excellent job of that. Here's this Easy Wood Tools Easy Finisher. This has got the large round cutter on it. And I'm just using it to smooth out all my ridges, make sure I've got smooth transitions, all of that. I'm going to use a small, just a thin parting tool to make a starting parting cut at the very bottom here. That's so that when I sand and when I start to finish, I know where the end of it is. And so it's not that I'm going to finish it and then cut into my finish. I've already got a parting line started, and so that's what that was for. I did sand and got it sanded all the way to 320. Here I'm starting to fit the lid. I've taken the body off. The lid is in the chuck, and I'm starting to fit that lid. I'm going to start with just a small tenon. Once I get it where it fits, I can then reverse all of this, put the body back in, put the lid in the body, and get the lid where it actually fits completely. But here, it just takes a little time. You have to be very patient. I want it to be a snug fit because I'm going to use the body to hold and turn the lid while I finish turning on it. So I'm going to go through several times of reducing this tenon and then testing it to see if it fits yet. It is still a good bit too big here, and I've got plenty of room to play with, but I'm just barely taking any off. You see a pile up of very fine shavings there, using very, very little pressure, so I don't want to go too far. It's way too easy to go from this thing is a mile too big to being way too loose. There are some things to do if you get it just a touch too loose. If you get it too loose, you cannot, there's not anything you can do with it. You just have to get another piece of wood and redo it. But I'm going to get it here, you'll see here in just a minute. It's going to be a nice snug fit that I have to kind of force the two together. One more time here. In fact, I'd go through this process quite a few more times. I'm not going to show you all of them, but I'm starting to get close here. I've gone down to a parting tool, getting real close to that final fit. You can see I'm just barely touching that tenon. Getting close. Can't begin to tell you how many boxes I've turned the body of, and then fitting the lid. I've gotten the lid, the tenon on that goes into the body. I've got it too small. I've even had to come back and recut all of that, get another piece of wood, and I turned a tenon to go on my tenon one time. It came out wonderfully, but it was so much extra work. all because I got too anxious and cut the tenon on my lid too small just simply because I got in a big rush. It's starting to fit there. And so let's just finalize it and we'll get this thing turned around. So we finally got it where it fits. It fits really nice. It snaps in, what we call a wood turner's fit. Only wood turners care that they fit so tight that they pop when they close and pop when they open. I'm not going to leave this lid at that, but as you can see, it's on there. It's being held simply by the friction between that tenon on the lid and the body. So I'm trimming that lid down. I want it, like I said, I want it to be flush across the top between the lid and the body. And so I've taken off that extra collar. Now I'm working on the actual tenon. There's going to be a little bit of that I'm going to leave as a integral knob. It's going to be a part of the lid. It's not going to be a separate piece added on. It's not even going to be very big. It's going to be very small. And I wanted that on purpose. It just looks better that way, at least in my eye. I'm going to work this whole top down, get it flush across the top. I'm going to get that little knob shorter. It's a little smaller than a nickel, a little larger than a dime, and it's undercut. But this maple is turning so beautifully. I didn't show you there, but there was one place where when I was fitting that lid, getting that tenon fit so it fit the box, I failed to pull my tool rest back up to the work after I checked it, and got a little catch there because I was so far away. And that's going to show up here after a while, but it's not a big deal. It's a little nick out of the edge of this lid. Just working on that little knob there, getting it to look the way I want it to look. I don't have a set pattern in mind with this. It's just what's looking good to my eye at the moment. You saw those little fine shavings there. It's not powder coming off of this at all. I've gone through and sharpened all my tools. In fact, I've sharpened that bowl gouge more on this project than I'd have for a lot of projects in a long time. Doing some sanding here. I'm not going to show you much of that because we sanded 100 grit up through 320 grit. And then I'm going to use my axe paste. My axe goes on the top and the bottom. And it just does a wonderful job. After I've sanded up to 320, I use this and use this abrasive paste. And it takes the grit all the way up to 1,000 or maybe a little above 1,000. Tom does a great job with this abrasive paste. It works fantastically. I really like it. But the whole idea of this paste is that you get that fine sanding without all the dust. I'm not having to run the vacuum at all, and all the sanding dust stays in the paste, and I just continue to buff that off until there's no paste left on the wood. It's all been pulled off on a paper towel. Changing that paper towel very often so that it does come off. Once that's done, I use the Axe Wax. This is the polishing restoring wax, and this is it used to be a very soft carnauba wax. Now it's a pretty stiff carnauba wax. So you see me working it in the jar there just to get a little bit on my paper towel. And then I wipe it on or rub it onto this wood, into the wood. I want a nice thin coat all the way around it. And then the hardest part of this whole process for me, once I get the wax on, leave it alone. This time I did. I put it on and then took the time to sweep up the floor. You can see my floor there. It's not pristine by any means, but I did sweep up about 99% of the shavings that were on the floor, at least under my feet. You can see there are some on the right side of the screen. There's a pretty good pile over there, but that's over against the wall, and it's not in my way at all. In fact, it's kind of difficult. There's a lot of stuff over there. So a couple times a year I'll pull all that stuff out and then we'll clean that out. But I'm buffing this wax off and it's doing a great job. I've got the speed turned up about 2,000 RPMs here. Remember that lid is just held in by the friction of the tenon on the lid and the recess in the box. But it is tight, and so every once in a while I kind of push on it with my paper towel there as I'm buffing just to make sure it's still in. But it stayed in. It was not a problem at all. I'm just giving it a good buff. Carnauba wax needs the heat that's built up by the speed and the friction between the paper towel and the box. Okay, we've gotten it waxed. This is actually turned around. You can see on my headstock is the lid. It'll fall off onto the floor here in just a minute. But I'm cleaning off the tenon and the residual wood that was in the chuck. And so we're just being very careful here. I've got the chuck in expansion mode, and there's just a very small edge that is holding this box on. In fact, it's going to come off here in just a minute. No harm, no foul, as they say, but it does come off the chuck. See fine shavings. You also notice that I'm cutting toward the headstock, not across. So I really don't know. You saw right there it come off. But I've put it on a friction drive now. That's a piece that I've had for a long time and used for this kind of thing. I've got another project coming up where I'll actually cut that big rim off of it, make it quite a bit smaller. So I'm probably going to have to return a friction drive. But same idea here. I've pulled the headstock up now, and I'll turn this tenon and bottom off so that I have a nice clean bottom on this box. And I'll use Phil Anderson's technique for removing the nub. I will cut it down, get it really small, undercut that nub a good bit, and I'll turn the speed down before I cut it off. And it just works beautifully. But I've already said a couple of times, this maple worked. It worked so nicely. I forget how nice maple works, how it turns so cleanly and so neatly. And it's pretty consistent. There's not a lot of density changes in it, unless you get a piece that's been laying on the ground for a long time, or maybe it's a tree that's been dead for a long time and you have some soft spots in it. But this tree, this maple here, if I'm remembering right, this tree had been down on the ground for less than a year. It was relatively dry when I got it. It's drying quickly. And the piece that this came out of, it was one of the smaller branches that I picked up. I didn't pick up a lot of small stuff. Most of it was a little bit bigger, so that I could turn like 8, 10, even 12-inch bowls with some of it. But this was a small limb, and it's working out just really, really nicely. We're done. We've taken the bottom off, got the nub off, using a mandrel in an old tenon as a sanding mandrel. So I've got the bottom of the box done. I'm going to do the inside bottom of the lid as well. I made a mistake there when I had it on the lathe to begin with. I forgot to turn out that bottom inside of the lid. And I should have done that before I even sized it. But I'm done here. Just matching up the grain. Looking pretty good there. There you have it. Got some pictures coming up, some slow rollers so you can see it up good and close. This is Doug at Wood Spun Round. Hope you've already hit the like and subscribe buttons if you haven't. If you would, I would appreciate it tremendously. That subscribe button will let you see anytime I put a new video out. But I really appreciate you being with me today, and I hope you've enjoyed it. This is Doug at Wood Spun Round, and until we get to meet up again, I hope you're able to spin them round.